a perfect break from planning a book is for me to go back to Antarctica. And to get me there, we've got Nadia. How are you, Nadia?
Hi, Paul.
Look at that. Live from Antarctica. It feels so good. Nadia is a marine scientist at Rothera Research Station in Antarctica, which was my old base. I was the base commander there for 10 years, in what feels like a lifetime ago. I've since been working in Antarctica, but there's a lot of me still in Rothera. And here we are with our second live session from Antarctica. So we truly are a 7-continent organization. Now, Nadia, how are you doing?
Yeah, really good, thanks. I think the internet should be quite good today compared to yesterday. And that is true. I have seen your name dotted around station in some old files. So there's definitely still parts of your your reign here on station.
Thank you, Nadia. You know, when you speak about Antarctica, it gets a lot of interest. So I know we're going to have a lot of questions and chance to chat back and forth after. So we probably should get on with your presentation. You ready to go to share the screen and things?
Absolutely. Yep. Good to go. Okay, is that sharing?
Let's just have a look. Oh, yeah, there we go. I'll add it.
Okay. Wonderful.
Nadia, you're...
Okay, great. Hello from the frozen continent. It is really such a special opportunity joining the festival live from Antarctica. And even more surreal is hearing about the fascinating worldwide projects taking place in the Malaysian rainforest from transects that are being conducted across Gabon's largest river, whilst I look out upon the desolated ice fields of Antarctica, a continent almost entirely devoid of terrestrial life. Today, I will be taking you below the surface of our frozen continent to share with you the explosion of diversity and colours that constitute my underwater office. I'd like to introduce myself as a marine biologist working with the British Antarctic Survey at Rothera Research Station. The station is located on a small island to the west of the Western Antarctic Peninsula. This is Adelaide Island. At 67 degrees south, we experience the intense seasonal forces that characterize the polar regions, with long polar nights in the austral winter to 24 hours of daylight in the summer. The period in which we are in now, the polar winter, marks the encroachment of huge ice sheets around Antarctica, locking the continent into a frozen desert. Since March, we have started to witness the formation of sea ice around Ryder Bay, the key study area for scientists such as myself. Ryder Bay and our station, Rothera, are positioned to the east of Adelaide Island, as you can see on this map. Dedicated marine science began at Rothera Research Station in 1997 with the opening of the Bonner Laboratory. Crucial long-term time series were established, which involved the scientific monitoring of multiple oceanographic parameters and biological processes. The Bonner Laboratory and Research Facility is bustling in the summer, with visiting scientists ranging from professors, PhD and master's students, and in 2013, a collaboration was formed with the Netherlands Organisation for Scientific Research, allowing Dutch scientists to conduct marine and terrestrial Antarctic research. In stark contrast, only 2 marine scientists remain on station for the winter period. During the winter, there is no resupply of laboratory materials or scientific equipment, and therefore research projects need to be carefully planned ahead of our deployment. Our team use diving as a tool to access these underwater habitats all year round, which, whilst is an incredibly unique opportunity amongst the other Antarctic research stations, it does present itself with many logistical challenges that we must overcome. First, the water temperature. Antarctica is a relatively thermal stable region, experiencing temperatures ranging from -1.8 degrees Celsius in the winter to heights of positive 2 degrees Celsius in the summer. The first plunges taken in Antarctica in the 1960s was taken by those who braved the cold in 10mm rubber wetsuits. These hardcore veterans would probably scoff at the level of protection we are equipped with today. We are armed with thick base layers that resemble a padded sleeping bag, which we wear under neoprene dry suits to prevent the encroachment of water. Only our hands and head are subject to the freezing waters, so for protection, we wear 7mm neoprene hoods and thick mittens. Conducting underwater work in mittens forces you to adopt crab-like behaviour, which interestingly is not necessarily representative of our marine counterparts here. Although Antarctica is so biodiverse, there is a significant lack of hard-bodied crustaceans and teleost fish, which are physiologically challenged by the cold waters of Antarctica. It has been suggested that ecological release from predation is responsible for the abundance and array of benthic creatures, which are strikingly diverse and give the seascape a Paleozoic character. This is an artistic representation of the seabed during the Paleozoic era, a period where the first vertebrates colonized the land and an explosion of life forms ensued on land and underwater. And here is a picture from Antarctica today, where echinoderms, polychaetes, gastropods, pycnogonids, cnidarians, and porifera coat the seabed in rich carpets. Each year, the wintering marine biologist establishes a range of projects with the aim of building upon existing research to further our understanding of the structure and function of Antarctic ecosystems. One of the principal themes of my research is to characterize the growth of benthic invertebrates across the season and to collect data about their feeding ecology. The first pioneering marine ecologists in Antarctica, such as Paul Dayton, who worked on Antarctic sponges 60 years ago, discovered the extremely slow growth rates of species here in comparison to their marine counterparts in temperate and tropical waters. It is now widely acknowledged that nearly all Antarctic species grow extremely slowly and not equally throughout the year. 2 reasons are put forward to explain this slow growth. First, temperatures. Low temperatures render the synthesis of fully functioning proteins much more difficult in temperatures below 0 degrees. The growth of cells is mainly dependent on the synthesis of proteins for structural and functional purposes. Second, the extreme seasonality of the environment in terms of food resources and low temperatures. In the winter, there is little water column productivity due to the lack of light and increasing ice cover, which impedes wind-induced mixing. The waters are clear, blue, and relatively depauperate in nutrients. Some species are beginning to enter a state of dormancy, such as one of our sea cucumbers, Heterocucuma steni, which for about 4 months retreat below the rocks, and therefore it makes them difficult to find when we're out diving. When the light returns in the summer and the sea ice starts to break up, water column mixing is resumed, bringing nutrients to photosynthetic depths. The period of 24 hours sunlight drives some of the most intense phytoplankton blooms worldwide. The water column is often green around this time, teeming with chlorophyll that is locked within the photosynthesizing plankton. The phytoplankton bloom eventually dies out and falls to the seafloor in the form of marine snow. And this is when most benthic species resume their feeding activities. So, to contribute research towards answering the paradigm about slow growth in Antarctic species relative to species in other habitats, it's important to gather growth rate data across the year. Most studies report annual growth rates which are not accurate, as most Antarctic species is often restricted to certain periods of the year. However, sampling species all year round is conducted by the wintering team, and we are the only research station in Antarctica that actually dive all year round, so therefore the data that we collect is even more unique. Without basic information about Antarctic species' life history traits, such as their growth rates, metabolism, reproduction, etc., it's difficult to establish conservation measures for the species that live within these fragile Antarctic habitats. Furthermore, with the well-recognised increasing threat of anthropogenic climate change, clear changes are happening in Antarctica. Sea ice extent and duration is reducing, which directly affect marine life. This is problematic as the sea ice holds icebergs fast within the ice. Without the sea ice immobilizing icebergs, collision between icebergs and the seabed are set to increase, and research has shown they already are increasing, destroying any benthic communities that may lay in their path. This figure at the top shows a grounded iceberg. To the left, an impacted community just after a scouring event. In the middle, the community recovering, but this is 11 years post-iceberg impact. And then to the right, this is a community that is protected from iceberg scour. Whilst a certain level of disturbance in an ecosystem does promote biodiversity, there is a tipping point at which ecosystems cannot recover and transition into alternative stable states, such as we are seeing in coral reefs, kelp forests, mangroves, and seagrass ecosystems. Less well recognised is the alternative stable states that may be happening on Antarctic benthic communities, but the research we are conducting here allows us to uncover more about the resilience of the Antarctic benthos and the recovery after ice scouring events. Furthermore, the loss of sea ice increases the mixing of nutrients in the water column and reduces the barrier that impedes light penetration into the waters below. Studies have began documenting an increase in productivity in areas which are experiencing sea ice loss in the form of increased phytoplankton productivity. As I mentioned, soft-bodied animals are extremely abundant on the seam floor, constituting about 10% of the documented marine life in the Southern Ocean. This compares with about 2.2% in Europe. Within Ryder Bay, 3 species of sea cucumbers are accessible within diver depths, and we regularly encounter these species. So I'm currently conducting a detailed growth study about the black sea cucumber seen in the top picture on the right here. In addition to collecting seasonal growth metrics and respiration data as a proxy for their metabolism, I'm also tracking their diet across the season. Heterocucuma steni is a suspension feeder and collects particulate matter in the water column by outstretching its tentacles, as you can see in the photos here. Fecal analyses have revealed the presence of mostly diatoms, which are single-celled phytoplankton made up of silica cell walls. By tracking which species the sea cucumbers are consuming across the year, I can test the hypotheses about changes in feeding habits as sea ice extent is reducing and productivity is increasing in tandem. Furthermore, we are continuing to build our knowledge about the dietary habits of a key player in the Antarctic ecosystems. Sea cucumbers play a really important role as ecosystem engineers, and as a result, provide ecosystem services in unique ways. As suspension feeders collecting this particular organic matter from the water column, they concentrate this nutritious food source in their body, and their feces are rich and support the seafloor species which cannot access this water column productivity directly. This is a process known as benthic pelagic coupling. So, among the rich invertebrate life I have touched upon, another important component of the benthic ecology of Antarctic habitats is the photosynthesizing marine plants, which I like to think of as underwater forests. Marine plants, such as macroalgae photographed here, play an incredibly important role in supporting food webs, providing shelter for an array of different species and stabilizing the sediments. Blue carbon is a hot topic in ecology at the moment. Marine plants are increasingly being recognised for their role of removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and storing it in ocean ecosystems. The way in which carbon is moved through an ecosystem is often in the form of detritus. So this plant material in the form of organic matter is exported from shallow habitats and buried into deeper sediments, known as carbon sinks, where it is then sequestered and buried, so that carbon is locked into the ground and taken out of the atmosphere. Research has already shown that macroalgae species generally break down at different rates and therefore contribute differently to carbon storage because of the time that it would take for them to reach these carbon sinks. Research about the degradation rates of Antarctic detritus from algae is still in its infancy. Colder temperatures have been proposed to slow the breakdown rate of this macroalgae carbon relative to macroalgae in temperate habitats, but this topic deserves further attention. So I have set up an experiment to track the breakdown of different Antarctic algae species. And by collecting sediment samples from around the experiment, I am searching for the presence of macroalgae carbon transfer through the sediment-water interface. Furthermore, by experimentally simulating accumulations of this detrital material, I am seeking to explore the ways in which this resource supports the food web. Sampling the invertebrate community associated with these algal communities, known as the detritivores, allows me to answer questions about how detritus is being used as a food source. By sampling the experimental detrital accumulations at different time points, I can track the succession of the invertebrate community and identify the range of species which either shelter in or eat this resource. So our work heavily depends on diving as a tool to access these underwater habitats. And I've just compiled a little clip of a video of us diving amongst icebergs. So this is a video from April. So I hope that gives you a bit of an insight into our operations in Antarctica and the beautiful backdrop that we are so fortunate to dive amongst. So fitting with the theme of the festival, I hope that you have enjoyed this short overview of polar biodiversity. Certainly, working with the biological variety and variability of life forms here is an incredible opportunity. The richness of the seabed that I can regularly visit is not to be taken for granted. The work we do here is permitting the tracking and documentation of changes in an extremely remote habitat. Regular in situ sampling permits a detailed understanding about the structure, function, and resilience of these Antarctic habitats, which I hope that I've demonstrated through the current ongoing projects. I wish for these long-term data sets and research to continue. And thank you so much for this opportunity. And if you have any questions that I'm not able to answer, feel free to email me at this email address below. Thanks very much.
Oh, Nadia, thank you so much. And as we were working on the book, inevitably I found the Rothera page from last year too, just to,
Good picture.
Bring it to life. I particularly enjoyed the boat pictures. Wow, pretty good conditions there. How are the conditions at the moment for boating?
Yeah, all our photos are in good weather. The conditions at the moment, the sea ice is starting to form slightly, especially more at the north end, because that's the prevailing wind direction. So a lot of the ice is accumulating in Hanger and North Cove. But then we have had some quite strong winds over the last couple of weeks that have blown out all the sea ice that started to form from the south side of the island. But it's so variable. For example, one day the water was really clear on the south side. We went to lunch, we came back, and the whole ocean with completely still conditions had just solidified and gone into this really slushy ice. And it's amazing just how quickly this transformation happens.
I remember that well. I remember diving plans, being scuppered or changed very quickly. Due probably, as you're living there, to weather systems maybe 150 miles away that we can't even feel at Rothera, and then something has changed and the whole lot comes in seemingly under its own immeasurable power with no wind around locally, and yet here comes zillions of tons of ice. So I remember that so well. And equally, of course, it going out in the same magical way.
And it's easy to think that, like, because we're on such a small island, that everything's happening, you kind of forget that there's the greater Antarctica out there, and then there's all these external forces that are actually influencing the conditions that we are experiencing here. But we've got sea ice diving. Yeah, sorry.
Had you done much ice diving before you arrived at Rothera?
Paul, never. And I still haven't, because we haven't technically dived through the ice yet. We've only really dived in slush and amongst a bit of brash and pancake ice. But no, never did any ice diving. The coldest waters that I've dived in is Germany, and it was like 6 degrees. So coming here, I thought it would be a massive shock diving in minus temperatures, but it's ironically, it's actually not that bad. Your hands are the thing that the coldest, as you well know. But yeah, from such a stark change, I wasn't too shocked by it.
I was pleased to hear you describe the dry suits and all the gear. You know, Joe Grabowski, who's the genius behind this festival, he's a tough Canadian, and he still ice dives with a wetsuit. There you go.
He still does. That is mind blowing.
Yeah, I remember diving in a wetsuit. I remember diving in a wetsuit. I lived in the States for 13 years, and all the dives in Michigan and northern Wisconsin under the ice were wetsuits. You know, painful things, but of course it's all adventurous. And then when I eventually moved to dry suits, you know, for many years, I was then very happy to have, you know, my dry suit at Rothera, and as you say, the big thick mitts. And now, you know, dry suits are as the norm, as you well know. But I have to confess pretty publicly here that when I wear my dry suit, I now wear a heated vest and heated gloves.
No, Paul, that is cheating. That's taking it too far.
Yeah, I used to be a polar hero. Now look at me, I'm putting on electric gloves.
That is definitely cheating. We've got the sea ice initiation though. So as part of our training with the field guides, to be able to walk out on the sea ice and conduct our sea ice diving, we will dress in an immersion suit and then simulate falling into the ice and heaving ourselves back out. Did you do that when you were here?
Yes, we did, because, you know, it's such a mobile and volatile medium, you know, sea ice, it's moving all the time. And one thing I learned, I had only dived under freshwater ice, and Rothera was my first under sea ice. And I was used to freshwater ice. It's very stiff and doesn't really flex or move much. Whereas sea ice, and apologies if plenty of you are already under sea ice divers who are watching and listening, but sea ice moves and flexes. It's much more alive. And there's a moment of judgment there. The judgment calls have to be a bit more finite. It's not just the thickness of the ice and the quality of it. It's the wind direction, as Nadia so described. It's the forecast, and it's the way this whole thing is moving. It's a very dynamic. Yep. So remember jumping in the dry suits and jumping in and being rescued, and then also particularly getting out on your own, which was a bit of a trick. You know, it's a bit of a thrash.
Well, that is to come, and I look forward to this next challenge. What else can Antarctica present itself with? Already there's so many weather constraints. If we see orca or leopard seals, we can't dive. Then the winds, and of course when there's sea ice, it massively is defined on the wind direction. If we've got inshore winds and under 10 knots, hopefully in the winter the winds will drop and stabilize more so we can get out. And then we're losing light, so there's only a set window where we can get out and dive. But when you actually get underwater and you do those dives and all the effort that it takes, so worth it.
I mean, what a unique experience, Nadia. You know, there you are in Antarctica, coming up to midwinter in a few weeks, and we're talking about your daily job is diving under the polar ice. Not bad, eh?
No, not bad at all. I think you said yesterday that if you get it right, you never have to work a day in your life, and I don't feel like that.
Brilliant. And Nadia, I've just put up the BAS banner underneath here so people can see the website. And everybody that's watching and listening, you know, I'm no scientist. I've spent my whole career in an industry called science support. You know, scientists need non-scientists, you know, doctors, dentists, plumbers, you know, pilots, carpenters, electricians, cooks, this whole great list. So if you're interested in running alongside Nadia, maybe because you are a scientist or you want to join a science support, go on the BAS website And the science support industry is a growing industry and has been for some years. And it's great going on to the vacancies and jobs just to see what's up. When I see what's coming, when there's a good list, I often post them on social media. But it's pretty exciting business to go on the website, see what Bass is up to, see what Nadia and her team are all doing down there at the moment, but also to think, well, maybe it's time for a change of career. And if so, go into science support in Antarctica. What do you think, Nadia?
Yeah, Paul, that's really good. And I think it's very important, as Ryan did yesterday, to acknowledge the scientific support, actually, that the scientists in proportion of people here is actually a minority. And we have got an enormous team of boating officers, diving officers, plumbers, electricians, mechanics that essentially keep the whole base running. So we need these people in order to be able to do the work that I'm presenting here. So it's just made possible by an enormous operation, which is really important to acknowledge.
Great to hear you say it, Nadia, because it's sort of it's an illustrative number, which means the difficulty of the work at the end of the world's longest supply chain. In small projects, we all know small science projects, everybody does everything. So you can have 3 scientists who are also driving to the airport and doing every single job imaginable. But on big complex projects, particularly places like Rothera, the only place in the world where they're ice diving through the winter, guess what? You need a lot of support. And that is an opportunity for you out there to go on that website, have a look and see if you fancy working in Antarctica.
Yeah, and it is such a unique experience, and then you can get to interact with the scientists and see the work that is being conducted here, whilst you might not have that opportunity at home. So yeah, good plug.
Great stuff, Nadia. Well, look, thanks so much for taking valuable time. Particularly, I know that the internet, can be a bit hit and miss, so we've done well with the timing. And it's lovely to see inside the lab there, and I can still feel it and smell it a bit,
Well, that's good. We should do a video of a virtual tour for next time.
A deal. All right, Nadia. But next time I see you, you'll be getting the book at least online.
Oh, wonderful. I look forward to it. And enjoy the rest of the festival. And thank you for hosting such a wonderful event.
Thanks, Nadia. Hey, I forgot to ask as well. Are you doing 1 winter or 2 winters?
Oh, I think I'm doing 2 winters. I just accepted the possibility of double wintering. So I'll probably stay here for 2 winters.
That's great. Good to know, because we'll be sending your books to Antarctica. So there you go.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. That would be very look forward to receiving it.
Well, hey,
see you on the next in October. Hey?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
I'll pass on hello.
Yeah, say hello to everybody and give Rothera a bit of a hug for me.
Oh, I will. Thanks, Paul.
See you, Nadia. Thanks a lot.
See you.